Thanks, Bernard, and good morning, everyone. I'm Frank Spencer. I'm from Cainmani. I've worked in the renewables sector for 2.5 decades now, and it's been quite exciting to see how renewables has infiltrated, if I can use that word, into the mining sector, and how products are developing to support mines and junior mines. And this panel is to not only look at energy security, but also ESG matters. And I do have quite an esteemed panel with me. Fortunately, this year, Hulme is not wearing a nappy, so I'm delighted. I don't know, he might still pull antics on the stage. But I'm not going to introduce my panel. I'm sure Fred and Hulme are well known to you. Dan from Discovery, Discovery Green. Interesting to see Discovery at a mining conference. I'm sure he's going to enlighten us on his interest in ESG and energy. But just perhaps some opening comments before getting to the question. Just I saw two interesting stories that may sort of fit into this narrative. One on the ESG side, maybe one on the other, on the energy side. That it was announced today that South Africa is looking to possibly import $10 billion worth of gas from the US in the next 10 years in a swap for automotive exports. And when one looks at how difficult it's been for gas exploration in South Africa and to get indigenous gas off the ground, often with environmental constraints. Maybe that's something that can flow into our narrative.
So we're calling that the Retief Goosen deal. It clearly was done by him.
Exactly. And then we've also seen a mining house take a solar project to court because the Section 53 was withdrawn. The project is well into construction, and the mining house wants that project now disassembled so that they can have their land back for helium. So that'll tell you who it is. So interesting to see perhaps also a little bit of a conflict between mining around land, and maybe this will flow into our conversations. But maybe turning Fred to kick things off from the Junior Mining Council view. What would you say are perhaps the most pressing, most important ESG challenges facing junior miners today? And is ESG even relevant in a world where ESG and DEI, like Bernard said, is being pushed to one side on certain global stages?
Thanks, Frank. Listening to Donald Trump, the answer is, it's not relevant anymore. So I don't know why we're talking about it. But I think, yes, it's very relevant. And I think ESG has always been around for decades in mining, just under different names in terms of environmental compliances, community engagements, and the like, and social performance. I think it's just been clustered, in recent time, specifically in ESG. But it comes with challenges, and particularly for the junior mining sector. And what comes to mind is three. The one is financial constraints. It's still very real, notwithstanding what we just learned money is available in the previous panel. It's a real challenge for junior miners from exploration up to production. What also is regulatory compliance. It's difficult for junior, mining companies, explorers to comply. And it's not because they don't want to, it's expensive to comply and it's very onerous. And also, another key challenge is community engagement. I mean, our communities has actually evolved over time. They became much more sophisticated. So, gone are the days of just a tick box exercise and mere consultation. Now you have to, which is the right thing, to consult with communities, make them part of your process from the very beginning. And I think, those are the key challenges, from an ESG, because as you know, building a project, proving your resource, it's more important for some than complying with these requirements. But our experiences, yes, it's challenging, but we have to find a way to comply. Because as we said before, banks don't even want to look at your project if you can't demonstrate that this is what you've done from an ESG point of view.
So maybe moving that from that to you, Hulme, we've heard, that it's expensive and difficult and onerous. And we have all of these laws that overlap, the mining charter, NEMA, PPAs requirements. What are some practical ways that junior miners can avoid getting buried in all of this red tape and costs? Are there areas that are particularly burdensome from that perspective?
what Fred touched on is important to understand, that ESG has always been there. It's just a new name for something that's always been around. Environmental, social, and governance. And ESG has become an industry in itself, ESG compliance. So every 12-year-old is now an ESG lawyer or consultant, where it's repackaging the same thing. And as I said, it's become an industry. It's like in Canada, regulation is an industry in itself. And in London, for example, if you want to raise capital, there's a company called Sustainalytics that if you don't comply with their ESG platform, it's very difficult to get investment there. So they just repackage what we already do. So there's nothing new. The compliance issues are not ESG. It's the compliance issues, as Fred said, under NEMA, under the NPRD Act. It's just a new way of repackaging the old problem.
Well, Bernard thought me as an engineer was obviously an expert on ESG too, so it's not just the 12-year-olds, I think.
Yeah.
But
There's even a lawyer pretending to be an ESG expert in Hume, so we're all guilty, eh?
But maybe, I think it was last week, the newly gazetted Act, I mean, how has that moved the compliance requirements then?
Well, in my view, it just creates massive confusion with respect to compliance. That bill, if it comes into effect, it makes the codes of good practice part of the Act. So from a BEE and a transformation perspective, you have to now comply with the codes of good practice. There's no mention of what happens to the mining charter. The codes of good practice gazetted on the 29th of April 2009 is a complete clusterfuck. If you understand what it says, please let me know. And it's now part of the Act. Then it refers to broad-based black economic empowerment as the yardstick under the Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Act. But there's no details, except in the new section 103, I think it says, that the minister can, quote unquote, impose conditions on you with respect to transformation requirements. So what it does, if it comes into effect, it will actually do away with your ability to comply with transformation imperatives as you want to, as you commercially want to. The minister will impose it on you. So that piece of, hopefully that bill will never amend the NPRD Act. But if it does, it's going to introduce more compliance that we don't know how to comply with.
Fred, I mean, do you agree with that assessment? Do you want to add to that?
I always agree with you. Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. And you know, this morning Lily was talking about, we've got so much legislation, you know, and it's a bugger up.
We don't need
You
more
know,
legislation.
we don't need more legislation. We need to simplify what we have, and we need to actually police it properly, implement it properly, because then you're going to have the required, you know, action and the required results. This is why I hate when we hear about new legislation, new bills, because we don't need that. We've got too much regulation, we've got too many acts, and it's confusing, and this act don't talk to that act. It's just not helping the industry, and especially the junior mining sector.
Well, maybe we'll take a short break from the compliance and that complexity and
You went there. Get us out of there.
and flip to the energy side and let Dan into the picture. Maybe, Dan, you can also maybe very briefly introduce what it is that Discovery Green is doing, and then look to, you know, ask the question, sorry, I've now gone too far, just, you know, what barriers are preventing junior miners from adopting more clean, carbon-friendly energy sources?
No, thanks, Frank. And I think that the barriers to ESG, at least as far as the decarbonisation part is concerned, have not been ideological at all for the last few years. Renewable energy has actually become cheaper, on paper at least, than coal. So the barriers have been more structural. So even if America has gone a bit off the boil, speaking about Trump, I don't think that's going to really impact the press for decarbonisation. What has been an issue is the ability of junior miners to actually access the benefits of large-scale renewable installation in the way that Eskom does. If you're not going to have access to a 150, 200 megawatt plant, you just aren't going to achieve the economies of scale as if, for example, you contract for a smaller plant, point one. Point two, You've got life of mine concerns. You may be a startup in terms of mining. A CFO of a junior miner simply cannot commit to a 20 or 25-year PPA, a power purchase agreement, in the same way that an Eskom or perhaps a more established larger miner can. You've also got issues of when the energy is coming. Is it even right for you? If the wind stops blowing, or the sun isn't shining and you aren't getting the energy, that's tough. Likewise, if the wind is blowing more than what you expect and you have to accept delivery of renewable energy, a junior miner is probably not going to be able to do that because you are bound by what you are ultimately doing. So has been a market need to be able to solve for those problems. And I can go on and on and on. All these power purchase agreements require very large capital outlays or capital securities, often past the limits of what a CFO might see as reasonable. So once you take all these aspects into account, size, take or pay requirements, term of a contract you're getting in, the financial commitments, junior miners find themselves in a bit of a straitjacket in terms of being able to access renewable energy that's affordable, almost on tap and on demand, and in a quantum that would make them comfortable for the stage of life that they're ultimately in. So you posed the question, what are we doing here in terms of Discovery, your health insurer or your banker as well, hopefully. It's fundamentally, this is a mathematical problem. If you can pull in all the energy that's coming from different sources into a single pool, have that central pool manage actuarially the risks of supply coming in at different times, and also being able to put security, and that's what we do. We're putting now together for the first time Discovery Limited's very healthy balance sheet to actually underwrite and securitize all these long-form power purchase agreements and then be able to actually sell them short-term to junior miners on the other side for the quantum that they want under risk terms that they ultimately do want.
And I think that's a very exciting evolution in the market. I mean, there are other players doing this, but the shift from having Eskom as a single supplier, who until recently was rather unreliable and perhaps still getting more expensive, to these long-term PPAs that I think, as you've pointed out, have not been ideal for startups or junior miners or whatnot, to having a market with liquid supply on terms that match offtake. We're going to see even more evolution in the space. I think it's certainly super exciting. But Dad, do you think this is something that's actually driving decision making? Or is it more about the carbon than energy security now, or electricity pricing? I mean, which of those three or all of them do you see actually driving interest in renewables today, rather than in load shedding when everyone was desperate for anything, whether it was green or not?
Right, so we're speaking about the energy trilemma. You want security of supply, you want clean energy, and you want affordable energy.
All three, please, immediately.
All three, please. So we're trying to see if we can solve all of that. In terms of security of supply, you need to bring on as much energy onto the grid, whether it's renewables, gas, nuclear, etc. That's the only way that ultimately as a country we're going to do that. So in an indirect fashion, that's exactly what we're doing in terms of large-scale energy installation. We will be announcing financial close very soon, for example, on a wind site, the largest wind site in the country to date that has been procured in the private market. With regards to clean versus price, we do see players, obviously, for where clean electrons are important, especially if you're looking at the carbon tax with one eye, if you're exporting to Europe and looking at the CBAM markets, definitely is important. I would have to say, being honest, the most important thing we see is probably more the financial imperative, that you have junior miners are looking to save, ultimately, relative to what they'd be paying, to the network operator right now, who currently is Eskom. But perhaps even more importantly, that's more important to saving to Eskom today, is that stability of payments that you're going to have. And the previous panelists spoke to that capital love stability. What we're offering is savings to Eskom today, but we're guaranteeing that price will not change for as long as you're with us. So that savings will probably you should expect that to open more and more through time, because whilst our price will stay exactly the same in real terms, it'll only go up, in other words, by CPI, you have a hedge in the money of knowing precisely what your electricity input costs are going to be.
Coming back to the ESG, I think, Fred, you raised how communities are becoming smarter, wiser, more active, and miners need to have the social license to operate. How good a job are junior miners actually doing this space when you're having these incredible expectations for local development, LED, job creation, and so whenever anything relating to infrastructure is announced, you have this expectation. How are junior miners, do you think, managing that, and how can they do it better?
Yeah, Frank, I think in my previous life, where I was head of transformation at Anglo Platinum, which is now going to be Valterra something, where we always got it wrong. When we start a project, we will then put plans together for the communities, like we're going to build a soccer field, we're going to build another school, we're going to put veggie gardens up, where there's actually no water and all that. Get it wrong, not consulting with the community in a real sense, where you understand the needs, where you take them along. We have a sit down with them and says, we're going to build this project, because if you don't have a viable project or mine, there's no jobs, there's no local economic development. So the catalyst and the key is to get the business right. And you need to identify now who's part of the business. And I think some of us has made the mistake of the communities. It's just a community, but the community is actually your social partner. It's your neighbor. Now, our experience suggests if you get that right from the beginning, whether you're restarting a mine or you're developing a project from start, and you take the community leadership in your confidence, provided you've identified the right leadership, because some of the challenges, you go into the community, everybody is a traditional council. You don't know who should I speak to. Today is this chief, tomorrow, next week, Wednesday, there's another chief. So you do your homework identifying who's the actual leadership, both traditional leadership, also your government leadership, and also your leadership that's your informal leadership. Because sometimes you make the mistake of ignoring influential leadership. And I'm not talking about troublemakers. I'm talking about people that has got the respect of the community, but they don't occupy community leadership positions. So if you can if you get the community engagement process right and the approach, and you take them on board from day one, you have half of a better chance of getting it right in terms of engaging the community, taking them along, developing your plans for the mine, and not just we are going to do the following, and you expect the community just to be tagged along. As I've mentioned, communities has become much more sophisticated. And we've seen so many violence and protest actions. And I've said many a times, it is when the communities speak to you, because you don't listen to them. So now we have no choice to go toe-to-toe in front of your gate, stop all the buses, stop all the trucks, and force you to listen, to our issues. Now, our experience, most of our players in the space, if you engage, if you show the respect, and you take them along, and you formalize your engagement process, you have a much better chance of developing a project, restarting the mine, or continue mining. So, but we have to acknowledge and we have to accept that the community is not just the irritation. They are our social partner. We don't need the license. If they're there, they are our neighbors. We have to show them respect, and we have to take them along in whatever we envisage this company or the mine needs to be. You need to make sure that they buy into that commitment and the vision. And as I've said many a times, if you do that right, believe me, your life of mine plan of say 40, 50 years, you will have a mine, for that amount of time. But at the same time, we also get it dismally wrong when we just assume, there's a community must just take what it's a favor. We're going to give you jobs. The community say, we don't know about jobs. We want to understand what you want to do. And many times, if you do that from the beginning right, you will have a supporting community as a partner, not as an irritation.
Hulme, maybe if you can build on a little bit more if you do get it wrong, because I think as you've said, Fred, often mines, infrastructure do get this wrong with communities, and you can end up not only with the community violence, but also with legal risk to projects. Maybe if you can address that a little bit further.
Look, there are already consequences for non-compliance if you don't comply with the environmental obligations, then you can get a pre-compliance notice under the National Environmental Management Act. So there's already a lot of environmental consequences, legal consequences if you don't comply. Then from a social and labour plan perspective, there's Section 93 of the Act, and ultimately there's the drastic remedy under Section 47, where a mining right can get taken away. But it's a long route to get there, and what foreign investors often don't understand, and you have to explain to them, it's not easy to have a mining right taken away, even if you haven't complied. There's a process to lead up to there. You've got an opportunity to demonstrate to the DMR or the DMPR now how you will fix your non-compliance, etc. So it's not just simply a matter of taking a mining right away.
Has it
So
ever
again,
happened? Has it ever happened?
I only know of one, and that's the Zolobeni
Oh, yeah.
mining right that was taken away. I don't know of any other Section 47 processes that have ever resulted in a mining right being taken away. I know of instances of where people have lost interest and abandoned mining rights, but I only know of one where it's been taken away. I've been involved in one or two processes where Section 47 directive has been issued, but after engagement with the DMR,
Yeah.
they've revoked it. Again, I'm repeating myself. It's not easy to take away a mining right. It's hard. Section 93 compliance directives also, they give you time to comply. So there is an opportunity. And I think Fred said something very important. In South Africa, if there's a crisis, we make more law. If there's an illegal mining problem, crisis, make more law. We don't need more law. We just need the state to enforce what we've got. With respect to Mantashe's latest attempt at humour for the mining industry, they have changed the social and labour plan compliance, that you actually have to comply with the social and labour plan while you are on care and maintenance, which is going to be difficult to navigate. But that is only if this ever becomes an amendment to the MPRD Act.
So this next question, Fred, I think it's been partly answered, and maybe the answer is less law and more enforcement. But maybe just expand on the reforms that you think are necessary in the sector from a policy, regulatory space to get ESG right.
It has to be simplified, Frank. It has to be simple, especially for your junior mining guys. One, two, this morning we spoke about tax incentives and all these good things, but we've been talking about these things for many years. The industry needs credible action. We must stop talking. And I think that is what the industry needs from an ESG compliance point of view, but to make it, do not introduce more legislation or regulation. Simplify what we have, police it properly, allow all the watchdogs to come to the table and enforce it in the right way, simplify it, but also incentivize the industry to do these things. If we can do that in the package, Frank, I can almost assure you we're going to have a thriving junior mining sector, guaranteed.
Dan, I'm going to put you on the spot with a question that you haven't seen, but talking about all the social challenges, is there a way that the sort of energy projects you're working on can also help address some of these ESG issues for mines?
Well, absolutely. I mean, with regards to the social aspect, there's going to be a lot of employment which is generated in terms of building out here. We have an enormous amount of infrastructural and CapEx spend, which has to be released as an imperative for South Africa. Where we are currently standing, we need about 60 gigawatts worth of renewables investments to actually be installed within the next decade. Not even necessarily to support 5% or 6% economic growth, but just to kind of maintain where we are as the coal stations reach the end of their natural life. On top of that, you've got about 14,000 kilometers of transmission lines which need to be put in. That is only going to be supported with a massive amount of employment and a massive amount of jobs, as well as buy-in from the community, to which we look to do. When we take a look at our downstream suppliers, it's an extremely important extremely important imperative. Maybe just to give an idea of how much investment we're talking here. A 100 megawatt wind plant costs about 2 billion rand to build. So a gigawatt, 20 billion rand, 60 gigawatts, we can all do the maths. And that's not even speaking about the transmission. So besides the E in ESG actually really being helped solve for in terms of decarbonisation, there's a huge amount of S that ultimately we're solving for here too.
Yeah. A couple of questions. We're going to end a little bit early because I know everybody's racing for lunch, although Bernard might use up all the time for questions, which could also be fun. And
I've got a good number of questions loading, so we're good here.
But just going back to when we see political things like the gas that's happening at the moment, where gas entities have struggled to get off the ground, arguably because of environmental legislation in South Africa, and this is a question to all, and then you hear of, massive import deals perhaps being planned from territories that don't have the same restraints and perhaps have a supply. I mean, isn't this like disheartening, or is this, how do we approach these sort of big deals when we could be doing something in South Africa to do the same? And should we even be doing gas? I don't know who would like to answer that.
Well, I think, our constitution is our best friend, but it's also our biggest enemy. Because anybody sitting in Sandton drinking a cup of tea can decide that it's a bad idea to do offshore gas exploration and can drum together support, get some money from somewhere who hates gas and charge off to court to try and stop it. So at some point, we have to let the equilibrium center again. And we have to understand that any form of energy has got an environmental impact. We can't stop it because of a perceived environmental impact. We must make sure that if the impact we fear arises, we've catered for it. We need to change that thinking. And unfortunately, it's very nice to use that example, to sit in Sandton and sip tea and say it's a bad idea to do drilling in the Karoo because you go there once a year on holiday. Tell that to a very, very poor person who's got no power. All they want is for you to drill in the Karoo to find gas to build a power plant. So at some time, we've got to be reasonable and logical about it. That's my view anyway.
Yeah, do you want to rebut that, Fred?
Yeah, without making any political statement, I think we as a country must stop listening to people outside our border. We have to understand our own needs, and we have to respond to that accordingly. So the challenge, and that's why I agree with Hume, is the challenge is somebody sitting in Sandton or sitting there in KZN and think of all this crap, notwithstanding the key challenges that we have, and then play to the audience when they go to America or London or whatever, and forgetting, but listen, we need to do this because this is what we need in this country. And I think as political leadership, we would like to encourage them to actually start doing the right thing that's best for South Africa, not what other people want us to do.
100%.
You know that Sandton is part of South Africa now, so you cannot ignore us on that defense.
Never go there.
I think that's absolutely right. I would even argue that the argument becomes mathematical. So you're going to need some sort of mix of power and inputs of energy all the time. One of the fundamental issues of renewables is that it can be intermittent in terms of the sun, the wind. We don't have many hydro resources anyway. With regards to peaking capability, I think gas will certainly have a role to play. Coal, I think, will just likely peter off naturally. As the stations become decommissioned, coal is not going to beat gas, nuclear, or renewables anyway, so I think that'll kind of ride off into the sunshine over there. You have to avoid, and I say this, as Discovery Green, part of our raison d'etre was to actually try and see if we can decarbonize the grid. You have to avoid what some might, call tree huggers, saying no nuclear whatsoever. Nuclear actually is one of the cleanest and safest forms of energy out there. So It may not form part of the mix in the short term because you're talking some serious capex and long-term planning for it, but there's certainly going to ultimately be some sort of mix. What is fantastic for South Africa is we're sitting on a figurative gold mine. We have amongst the best solar resources on Earth, particularly in the Northern Cape, and our wind resources are not too shabby either. If we get that mix right, and there's going to be a bulk of renewables ultimately, we get this right, we stand the chance of having, once again, amongst the cheapest electricity on planet Earth, and that's going to put us all in very good stead if we get it right.
Absolutely. Just in closing, perhaps final comments from each of you on this, and perhaps one practical step that could help junior miners in this space. Go from you, Hulme.
So I'll focus on the G in ESG. We've got to go the governance. Mining is about production, grade, health and safety. We've got to go back to production, grade, health and safety. If you look at any mining board that has been successful, it's stocked with engineers and geologists. And what do? Mining engineers do production. Geologists do grade. Who does health and safety? Mining engineers and geologists, because it's their responsibility. Do not stock the board with HR people and lawyers and all of the rest, because they're not engineers. If you really, I mean, look at Pieter Steenkamp. I mean, Bernard, to blow a bit of smoke up your arse. When you took over, the mess that Harmony was, when I worked there, when it was becoming a mess, you had this phrase, I'll never forget, you said, I close golf courses. And the first thing you did there was close the golf course, because the HR wanted everybody to play golf.
But I was wrong. The golfers are ruling the world.
Yes,
I was
correct.
wrong.
Yeah. So let's stick the G in governance, engineers, and geologists.
Dan.
I think what is going to be key for junior miners to engage in with regards to their energy security and enhancing their bottom line is flexibility, ultimately. So you have a life of mine of perhaps 7 years. You can't take a power purchase agreement that's more than that. If things don't go according to plan, what happens if you have operational shutdown? You're not terminating for convenience, but you just can't go on because something happened with the commodities super cycle, which we didn't foresee. You have to be able to get out of the contract scot-free. What happens if the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine as you expect and you're taking delivery at the wrong time? You should not have to pay for what you don't consume. There's a lot in terms of flexibility. What if, for example, you want a contract, you see a mine coming on in a few years' time, but you can't contract for the energy right now because you can't take delivery? You want to be able to enter a contract that says, guys, can I reserve my spot? And when the time comes and my mine comes online, I can take it. And what if my mine comes online a bit earlier or later than expected? Is the flexibility there? That's the name of the game. That's ultimately what we have solved for, what we are offering right now, and what our first miners who are coming on, we have some large miners, Implats is one of them, are going to be benefiting from our first tranches of mines. I'm not going to go into how we do it. That's a story for another day and not the purpose of this panel. Of course, welcome to field any questions privately afterwards. But I think that's absolutely imperative for junior miners to get into the game in terms of your energy security, clean energy, cheaper energy, know what you're getting, and flexibility.
No, you've
Fred,
got 8 seconds.
You've
for your
got 6
response.
seconds.
Okay, I've got 5 seconds. Junior miners, I think, should continue going beyond just compliance. They should continue demonstrating, the actions to transparent reporting, making sure government, investors, the employees, the stakeholders knows what's actually going on. Lastly, stakeholder engagements must not just be, we're going to engage. It has to be open, transparent, with a real intent in taking the stakeholders on board. That guarantees you sustainability.
Thank you.
Frank, you seem to have some shit on your liver with this gas deal. Just share with us, what is wrong with it? Your views. Why don't you like it?
I think 2 things from my perspective,
Yes,
first
yes,
of
yes.
view. One is, I think, as Dan was talking to, with wind and solar and storage together, we can outcompete gas. So running what should be peaking plants at the sort of planned 50% capacity factors, which is half of all the time, just in any independent modeling done is madness. And that's what this deal would lead to, that we would be running large gas. So it's not optimal from a price path, and not optimal from an energy security, because we're relying on what's arguably now a belligerent foreign power. And so going back, do what's best for South Africa. I think the no-brainer path is to build lots of wind and solar and batteries, because that gives us the lowest cost, highest energy security, and then maybe some indigenous gas to fill in the gaps. So yeah. Plus, I'm never getting a US visa again for what I said, so I like to bash American things.
Yeah, okay. So Guy Richards asked you, Dan, Discovery Green has offered a 20% discount to Eskom for 90% of the time. Can they offer a 20% discount for 99% of the time? Just briefly, you are a part solution, or are you a total solution for a significant energy consumer? Are you also just stepping in that? I don't want to open the baseload conversation.
No,
you
of
know
course.
where this
Absolutely.
question's going.
Absolutely, yes. It depends what product you want from us. We actually are a total solution. We can offer 100% of your energy to be renewable guaranteed. That comes at a bit more of a premium right now, but it will be cheaper than Eskom ultimately. We can offer less than 90% at an even cheaper price, but we've actually worked out that your savings maximize at the 90% level. Because the issue is that if you, for example, opt for 50% coverage, which is maybe more linked to a PV daytime profile, that can come cheaper, but you're going to be exposed to what's happening during the night time. And as the Eskom price goes up during the night, and what we think is a risk, it falls during the day, because as we get more PV coming online during the day, it's just supply and demand. And we've already seen it now in the RTP price. Your standard hours are going to go down, your off-peak goes up. But I don't want to, it's a fascinating topic, very passionate about it, don't want to go too much into it. But yes, we're actually going to be offering right now you can, a 100% solution, more expensive than the 90%. We think the optimal is if you choose the 90% product, but you can actually choose anything with us.
Fred, perhaps I can ask you, there were a few questions here around coal. We spoke about nuclear enough. I don't want to go to nuclear far out, even if we commit tomorrow. You coal miners continue to pollute in the meantime. So
that's Bernard Swanepoel from Sozanguve's view. It's not our view.
From Sandton. I'm from Sandton.
Oh, from Sandton. Bernard, unfortunately, coal is an important. It's part of our base. So I don't think, and with all due respect, a lot of the coal miners, there's a perception that they pollute, but they're doing the coal mining quite responsibly, particularly in South Africa.
Let me give you the question that was put, because I think I'm linking to where you're going in the question. In your opinion, how should the junior miners in the coal space innovate their business model in response to the energy transition? So that's a properly framed question, which you were answering without me asking it. So now carry on.
That person that asked that very, very intelligent question must actually come and see me. As I've mentioned, coal will always, particularly in the South African context, will remain a key strategic imperative. And we don't foresee, that's going to change in the foreseeable future.
I want to close off, if I may, with Hume, because he's going to give us some sound bites, I think. He has, really. He's all over the newspapers calling our best effort at legislation, all sorts of bad words. Realistically, after 30 years of seeing this administration legislate...
33.
Yeah, many years, eh? Are you realistically expecting a change? Are you realistically expecting that our approach will change from we need a new law to we need less laws, better implementation? So you've made a fortune out of this approach, so let's talk about the different approach.
Long may the mess continue. But so the answer to the question is unfortunately a little bit long. In 2004, the MPRD Act came into effect. You'll remember that we lurched from mining deal to mining deal to mining deal to empowerment deal to refinancing to financing. Why was that? 3 reasons. One, everybody wanted to be in South Africa because it was a transition to democracy that people didn't think would happen, and Mandela was around, and people wanted to be here. The second reason is commodity prices, obviously. The third reason is that decision-making was administrative, not political. You remember the first mining charter was negotiated and signed by everybody. It was signed by the Minerals Council, the Chamber of Mines, it was signed by NUM, it was signed by Solidarity, it was signed by UASA, and it was signed by, there was a fifth one, I can't remember. Yes, yes. And it was negotiated, so everybody knew it was coming. Then the decision makers in government, Jacinto Rocha, hard man, but he made decisions. And he took administrative decisions. Qualified geologist. Njaka Malloy, qualified mining engineer, took decisions. Sandile Noxinga was the DG, took decisions. There was some politics in it, obviously. But now, all the decision making is political. This latest bill was not discussed with the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee on a Minerals and Energy Policy. It was foisted on the industry. The artisanal mining joke policy, there were reiterations, there were comments. The one that was finally gazetted had 2 words changed. Nothing in the construction or the scheme of it. We've got to move away from that. So to answer your question, the only way we're going to go forward is we must have administrators that administer, not politicians that administer.
I've never heard anybody pronounce bill like he does. Bill. He spits it out in total disgust. This bill is up for discussion. What a fantastic, all over the place. That E, S, and G is in the DNA of our industry. I support that. We group it together. We try and make it something, and perhaps back in its components, we are having the right conversation. Thank you very much, everybody. It is lunchtime. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.